Thank you for joining the Business Over Breakfast podcast. I'm your host, Steven Rosenthal, and we are going to be jumping into another great episode, learning how I am starting to grow this business. Good, afternoon here. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon. It's Saturday afternoon. Just finished breaking in my new watch on a nice long run. The Timex Ironman triathlon watch. I am not a triathlete. I also have no aspirations at this time to do the Ironman. Talk to Josh Braun for that. But what am I talking about here today? Private podcasting is the topic that I wanted to review with you all. And I'm excited to share my learnings about my research. So I had an opportunity come up. I guess it was either yesterday or maybe last week, I think it was. But anyway, I had an opportunity come up to provide some podcasting services. And as I was planning, what I wanted to offer, and as I was thinking through it today, Saturday, the grind doesn't stop, right? But as I was thinking about it today, I really think there's an opportunity to utilize a private podcast. Now, I'm not super familiar with them at this point. Trying to be a quick study, of course, as always, and scale that learning curve. But I do subscribe to one private podcast through Patreon, the DGMG A-List podcast. Dave Gerhardt is a CMO, longtime CMO of software companies. Right now is a CMO of Privy. Really great LinkedIn content. Would encourage you to check that out. Also, check out his DGMG. His call to action on every podcast episode is to tell a friend. So here I am telling my friends. So check that out. But Patreon, that's one platform he has a private blog, a private podcast, a private Facebook group that's all wrapped up into one. Also exciting, going to be a part of his insider group in the fall for that. I've been trying not to get suckered into a lot of these shiny penny opportunities, but been following him for a long time, really value his stuff from a marketing standpoint. So, as you know, I'm focused on sales and marketing, providing those services to companies at an outsourced service. On the marketing side, focused around social media, podcasting, blogging, and newsletters, primarily podcasting. And then on the sales side, focused on reselling software or not reselling, outsourced sales for software companies or services-based companies that have some sort of software component to it. So growing my book of business for both those sides. And then it's also kind of this weird interplay of I'm growing my business of providing these services and then delivering these services to my customers, for my customers, to their customers. So, a lot of sales and marketing going on, to say the least. Anyway, how am I staying on top of the game there on the marketing side? The only thing that I really subscribe to wholeheartedly and put money towards is the Dave Gerhardt DGMG group and insider group. And then Gary Vaynerchuk puts all his stuff out for free. So I consume that regularly and would pay for that if there was an opportunity to. Sasha Group, maybe I'll hit you up with the mentor group there. And then on the sales side, I'm focused on the Advanced Selling Podcast. I've been a long time listener, probably 6 or 7 years. That actually is what that podcast introduced me to the podcasting space. And I've really, really enjoyed consuming their stuff. They've prompted me to read a bunch of books on sales that have really shaped my whole career, honestly. I would attribute a lot of my career to that. Needless to say, I'm a part of their insider group as well. So on the marketing side, I really only am part of DGMG, and the sales side, I'm a part of the ASP insiders. So I'd encourage you to check both of those out. Dave Gerhardt, Twitter and LinkedIn, that's where I got to know his content and his personality. and then Brian and Brian and Bill on the advanced sell. Sorry, I was looking at my what I'm talking about next. Brian and Bill on the Advanced Selling podcast. Look that up. All the podcast directories for both sales and marketing and sales, respectively. So, private podcasting. What is it? As you know, getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty details on podcasting, what happens is, so let's take Business Over Breakfast as an example. I am right now on YouTube Live streaming Business Over Breakfast with the purpose of tabulating and recording how I'm building this business. If it's a failure, I've got a great history to look back on as to why. Hopefully not a macro failure, just some micro failures. If it's a success, I have this whole reservoir of information as to why it may be a success that I can then repurpose and build, my personal brand around, and then use that as a tool for why I want to purchase companies and grow them in this way, or start new companies and have an audience built around, how I built this first, more publicly facing company. So Business Over Breakfast, that is kind of the 30-second to 60-second version as to why this exists. The show right now is being streamed to my personal YouTube channel. After I stream that show, while I'm streaming that show, I'm using OBS Studio version 25 that is recording to a Microsoft Teams site, SharePoint. And that is then going to be, streamed to YouTube. YouTube, I put that into a playlist, the Business Over Breakfast playlist. I splice out a highlight sometimes and upload that and put that in the playlist as well. Then I take the recording, I rip out the audio. I have the intro, outro already in OBS here, so that's already there. So then I have the audio for a podcast episode. This is where it gets fun. So next, in order to make this audio available on a podcast, what I then connected, it told me. There we go. We're reconnected. Sorry about that. So where was I? So after the audio is downloaded onto Microsoft Teams, I then take that audio and I then upload it to a podcasting hosting service. So the hosting service really is just putting the audio onto a server and then creating an RSS feed. So, the one that I use for public facing podcasts is Buzzsprout, right? Buzzsprout. Not BuzzFeed, Buzzsprout. Yep. And so I upload this audio onto their platform. I use the paid for platform because I can upload one, more listening time per month. So I put that up on the platform, and then it creates a really simple syndication or an RSS feed. So it's a file that is easily read by a computer. The information is fetched by this RSS feed reader, converts that file into the latest updates from the website in a really easy to read format. So, for this, that's what the whole backbone of podcasting is about. So the audio is going to go on a server. That's going to create an RSS feed. The directories. What is a directory? Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. There is a ton of them that I could talk about if you would like on some other episode probably. But, so there's directories that then are going to pick up that RSS feed. Here, I'll give you the list that I focus on: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music / Audible, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Deezer, Listen Notes. Then you've also got Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro, Castbox. Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro, and Castbox, they're all automatically up once it's listed in Apple Podcasts. So let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, let's see, 8, 11, 12, 16 different directories that my RSS feed is picked up on. Once that's picked up, and the RSS feed is then picked up by these directories, it is then made available for you to view. So if you go into Spotify and you type in Business Over Breakfast, I think that's the first one. If you go into Apple Podcasts and type in the same, you will find my show. So all really exciting, tools to get your podcast out there and available. Now, so that's how you would get the podcast available. Each of these directories goes through a vetting process in which they're going to determine whether or not your podcast should be made accessible to the audience and users of their app. Once they have confirmed that and your podcast is now available on these directories, if somebody subscribes or follows in Spotify or, somehow is regularly going to access this show, there's nothing you need to do to make sure that your audience who's subscribing gets the next show. That's the beauty from a business standpoint and a marketing standpoint of podcasting. So once the QAD user subscribes to the QAD customer podcast that we put on for Pix Doc Lab, the next time I release a show, so next Wednesday when I release an interview with, I think, who's it going to be with? Ooh, sneak peek. When I release an interview with Resco Products, that will automatically, called ERP is a really fast idiot, that will automatically show up in the feed of somebody's podcasting app. So when I log into, for those of you who are actually listening to this on the podcast, I apologize. Make sure you type in Steven Rosenthal in YouTube, look up the Business Over Breakfast playlist, and then this is called What is a Private Podcast, if you want to see what I'm about to show. So when you log into the Apple Podcast app, for instance, you're going to see, if you can see it, there you go, up next. So this automatically uploads. So when I refresh here, it's going to automatically upload new shows. See, there you go. It's uploading new shows. I didn't do anything to get that show there. This is the trading card show, that Dinging Corners, by Slapstocks, a new trading sports card trading company. Anyway, so I'm subscribed to their podcast. That means that whenever they release a new episode, it automatically shows up in my feed. So that is hosting and directories. Now, why do I talk about this when I'm trying to talk about private podcasts? What I just described for you is how public-facing podcasts go. So if you were to go into one of these directories, which we just reviewed, and type in QAD Customer Podcast or the Business Over Breakfast podcast, you will find my two podcasts that I'm the host of at this point. There's a number of other ones that we're producing, but we're not going to get into that. Now, that's a publicly facing podcast. Anybody who's listening to this feed right now can hop in there and find that. A private podcast is when you use a hosting provider. Remember Buzzsprout, the hosting provider that's going to host your audio on a server. They are going to create a RSS feed that is unique to a particular individual or to a particular app. So typically these podcast hosting companies, from my limited research so far, and please correct me in the comments if anybody has any information. I'm learning this as I go, which is, the whole purpose of this. Ooh, my video is all blurry. Sorry about that. So RSS feed, a private RSS feed, a lot of these companies that, like, for instance, Podbean or Resonate or let's see, we've got Patreon, which I already mentioned. Transistor, Podbean, Resonate, Storyboard, or Patreon. Those are some of the top providers, hosting providers, that will give you the ability to create a private RSS feed that will only be available to, say, an email list, or it will be available to the app that they put together. So that's like Transistor, for instance, or no, Transistor is not a good example. Maybe Podbean. Yep, Podbean, for instance. You put your podcast audio up onto their hosting provider. Then your consumers, audience, download the Podbean app, and that's how they can access this RSS feed that's created. But you're limiting access based off of whoever's logged in to the Podbean app. The cool thing about all this, people, that I'm really, really excited about is some of these, the one that I'm probably going to use is Resonate. I'm going to try this out for PicsDocLib's employees, is you're able to create this individualized RSS feed, and then with a click of a button, or Transistor is another good example, with a click of a button, they can listen to it in the podcasting apps that they're used to. So Apple Podcasts, for instance, Patreon does this. The DGMG A-list or podcast that I'm listening to on a weekly basis or sometimes daily, I'm actually able to listen to that podcast on Apple Podcasts, but it's private, and I pay for that. So that's really cool way for businesses who say they have proprietary information that they want their audience to be consuming. Say you're a software company and you want, as a part of your deliverable to your customers, to have a private podcast that allows your customers to get to know the people in your company, and then say they get some training, they get some other value in a private podcast that's exclusive to them. This is a great way to better engage and build a community of your customers. So that's one area. I'm not going to bleed all of my information here. I've got some pretty cool business plans that I'm building with some partners and with some opportunities here that I have to produce podcasts. But so anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment with these hosting platforms and the different ways that they connect to the directories. And I am going to try to create these private podcasts that are available to exclusive audiences. And there are all kinds of revenue streams to be had. And, if you're just tuning into this, you should listen to a lot of my other episodes, because I'm a big proponent of value, not just about getting people in and taking their money and getting revenue streams. But I do think that's how you build business, and that's important. So I'm going to mention it. There's a huge opportunity here for business people to take advantage of, for marketers to take advantage of. And I think sales and operations organizations, this is going to be a big, big area of opportunity. Who knows if it's going to be realized, but I'm going to be there if it is, and I'm going to be providing services around it. So excited to experiment with this, and I will keep you posted once I've actually rolled out this business model, tested it, iterated on it, found out what works. I'll probably spill the beans around the whole thing, because I will want some of these listeners to be interested in taking advantage of it themselves for their companies. Thank you guys. I really appreciate the time today, and until next time. Thank you. I appreciate you joining again for this episode of the Business Over Breakfast podcast. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe and leave a nice review for us on whatever podcast directory, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, that you have chosen to consume this wonderful podcast. Make sure you tune in again, and we look forward to seeing you.